Welcome to the 14th COVID313 Community Coalition for Families and Students Teletown Hall. Again, I'm Christine Bell, mother of 3 awesome children, and I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director of Urban Neighborhood Initiative. I'm also a proud member of this coalition and the co-moderator for today's town hall. We have a really exciting group of speakers today to talk about how we should be talking about anti-Blackness, discussing the concepts of defunding the police, and getting insight from a virologist about a second wave and how we keep ourselves safe in reopening. We are translating the town hall to Spanish, Arabic, and ASL, so we want to give folks time to get in the right place and on the right line and get comfortable. Cindy, please share the phone number for Spanish translation.
Si necesita traducción en español, por favor habla al 313-626-7440, 313-626-7440.
Thank you. Saeed, please share the phone number for Arabic translation.
إن كنت بحاجة للترجمة إلى اللغة العربية، الرجاء الاتصال على الرقم 313-241-7030. الرقم مجددا هو 313-241-7030. وشكرا.
Thank you, Saeed. Julie, share the instructions for ASL, please. Thank you, Julie. To start us off today, please welcome Nkenge Browner. Nkenge?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nkenge Browner. I'm a mother of 2 and the organizing director at Mothering Justice. We hope you join us tomorrow. Mothering Justice will be doing a community giveaway of diapers and formula from 1 to 5 at our Detroit location. Please let all the moms that you know that we'll be doing that, and check out our website, motherinjustice.org, for more events. I'm so glad to be here and expand and explore this conversation around race, community, the pandemic, and our children, and how it all connects. We're going to discuss anti-Blackness today. And unlike racism, which requires social, historical, and political capital, anti-Blackness can be practiced by anybody. And because of American racism, anti-Blackness is everywhere, including the lesson plans our children are following, and sometimes even parades as a compliment. Anti-Blackness is having American history as a core class in middle school and African American history as an elective in college. Anti-Blackness is telling Black girls with African names that you'll never be able to pronounce that, while expecting us to learn Polish and German names without issue. Anti-Blackness is suspending elementary age Black boys for haircuts. Anti-Blackness is the societal acceptance of terms like Black on Black crime. Anti-Blackness gives gateway to prejudice and justifies racism. Avoidance is just passive acceptance. Your kids are being exposed to anti-Black sentiment, and discussion and acknowledgement is one of the first ways you can combat it. Today, some of our guests will be offering tips and guidance on having these hard conversations with your children. Thanks for joining us. And now we're going to hear from another mom on our panel, Arlisa.
Thank you, Nkenge, and as always, very helpful and informative. Again, my name is Arlisa Hurd. I am a member of 482 Forward, a member of this coalition, and I'm a mother of 2 sons. You know, for the past 14 weeks, this coalition has been right here doing its thing to bring one collective message. Just think, who else could bring together diverse communities, competing organizations, parents, youth, and the faith-based community all together at one table and allow everyone to have input and a voice every week from planning to production? This is how we do it. See, we're not afraid to touch topics that make some folks uncomfortable, speak about the not so popular, or give a platform to speakers and experts who challenge your ideology, yet make you think. because see, that's how we do it. In fact, what other coalition would feature 3 different parents' perspectives every week for 14 weeks? Drop self-care, yoga, and exercise in the middle of mental health, education, financial, and family support discussion topics. Not to mention, provide interpreters in multiple languages, the hearing impaired, and boldly lift up and support immigration rights. Yeah, that's how we are doing it. And today we are doing it again. We're talking about race, Black lives, brown lives, and the police. This is special to me today because once again, I have 2 sons, 2 Black sons, who were just cute and cuddly when they were 4 years old. But now at the ages of 25 and 14, they're too often perceived as a threat, a thug, or a criminal. In fact, my oldest son and several of his friends won't even drive through certain cities and neighborhoods for fear of being pulled over and potentially arrested by the police. And we've all seen how these so-called random traffic stops or the old, we have a call about a robbery in the area scenarios play out. Oftentimes, it's the start of a series of unfortunate events leading to the prison pipeline. So that's it for me for now, but I want you to hold your seats because this is how we are doing it today. So now let's hear from Cindy Gamboa. Cindy?
Yes, that is how we do it. This is what we're doing. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again. I am Cindy Gamboa. I am a proud mother of 3 and the organizing director at Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. I am so glad to be in this panel today, and I can't believe they keep asking me to come back. This coalition was formed with love, the caring, the respect that we have for our communities. We wanted to make sure that everyone had the most up-to-date information from trusted sources because this pandemic has been difficult for so many of us, as well as create space so that we can have these discussions and acknowledge the issues that are impacting us all, like anti-Blackness, immigration issues, and the realness, the rawness that we're all dealing with. We wanted to make sure that everyone had the information they needed to deal with these uncertain times. And because our communities are so unique, we knew that we had what it took to make sure that everywhere we were reaching everyone. So we wanted to ensure that language access was not an issue for anyone in our community to get the information that they deserve. So we partnered with caring individuals that helped us out. We've had live translation for all 14 of our virtual town halls since we started. Our interpreters tirelessly log on week by week to help us make this happen. Gloria Rosas, Cristina Ruiz Mazon, Liliana Torres, Said Dadad, Nashua Dadad, Katie Kaur, Julie Paletti, we thank you. We also make sure that you can engage with presenters every week and ask critical questions that you need to know. We have a huge team that have been on standby, waiting to magically ensure to deliver your questions to panelists and make sure that you get the answers that you need. Staff from Urban Neighborhood Initiatives, 482 Forward, Congress of Communities, Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, and countless others, we thank you. This is how we do it. Christine?
Thanks, Cindy. This is definitely how the COVID313 Coalition does it. We've been working over the last 14 weeks to make sure parents like me have the most up-to-date information about schools, the virus, and the fight for Black lives. We work diligently to not shy away from hard conversations, to lean into our discomfort, and to work hard to ensure we are bringing you both entertaining and useful segments. I've been so proud to be a part of this group and learned so much from our viewers and our partners. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll be taking a little break to strengthen our programs so that we can ensure we're doing what we set out to do. make sure parents and students have the most up-to-date information about our COVID crisis. Please let us know what we can do better moving forward. There's a survey that will go in the chat where you can let us know. We're here for you and consistently trying to improve because this is how we do it. Cindy, can you share the translation number for Spanish one more time?
Si necesitas traducción en español, por favor habla al 313-626-7440. Hoy la señora Gloria Rosas y Cristina Ruiz Mazón harán la traducción. Gracias.
Thank you, Cindy. Saeed, please share the number for Arabic translation one more time.
إن كنت بحاجة للترجمة إلى اللغة العربية الرجاء الاتصال على رقم 313-241-7030. معكم سعيد ونجوى دحدح ونحن مستعدون لخدمتكم. شكرا. Thank you.
Thank you, Saeed. Julie, please share the instructions for ASL for folks that have just arrived. Thank you, Julie. Jametta?
Yes. Well, hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. It would help if I've done this 14 weeks and somehow I still forget to hit the right buttons. But let me share with you that just like all of the other presenters, I am blessed to be part of this. My name is Jametta Lilly, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of the Detroit Parent Network. I'm a mom. I'm a Nana that's called Queen Nana. I'm a Detroiter, and I am proud to be one of those women from Michigan. All of our speakers have been talking about this is how we do it. So there's something very special about being in this place with this coalition, and something very special about you that you tune in every week. That says to me, it says to us that we have the spirit of cooperation. Not only do we have a spirit of cooperation, we don't shy away from conflict. We give each other challenges. We listen deeply, and we come back each time with more information and more facts to help us keep growing. So we hear the word COVID, and that's a negative C. You've been hearing cooperation, coalition building, collaboration for our diversity. And it's all about how do we build our beloved community. So with that, I want to let you know this is how we do it, with love, with passion, with commitment, dedication, and collaboration as change agents. So we know you have that same spirit, which means that you're going to enjoy the rest of our time together. We have about 90 minutes of more and informative and powerful information. Want to make sure that if our experts, as you come on, would you please be sure to cut off your mic and then come back on at the appropriate time. As Christine already mentioned, we'll make sure that if you're in the Facebook, you can chat us. We want to hear from you. You can also text us your questions or comments to 313-288-2082. Again, that is 313-288-2082. And again, just a reminder for our experts, speak slowly. We are committed to translation, and we want to make sure that the audience can hear all the powerful things that we are saying. And so we've been talking about coalition building and caring and commitment. And we know we do all this for our children. We do all of this for our next generation. And the messages that we give them are so critical and so very, very important, which is why we want to move towards a very important topic, which is talking about our children and what are the messages that we give them to address and begin to cope with racism and racism within racism and anti-Blackness. So I'm pleased to have join us our very first speaker, who is Danielle, and she is with Mothering Justice. I'm so sorry, that's Sam from Mothering Justice. Sam, forgive me. Come on board, please.
Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to be here and to have an opportunity to be a part of this panel and this discussion. I am a part of the Mothering Justice team. I am a coordinator for one of the fellowship programs that we run specifically for white folks and especially white parents. So a lot of the work that we do, obviously at Mothering Justice, centers mamas and families. And in our fellowship for white people, we also try and center a lot of the work that is specific to white parents and how we need to be combating anti-Blackness in our households, in our families, and how we can be working to raise children who are pro-Black, who are aware of racism in this country, that have language around race, and that can really show up in the world in a better way. And as true accomplices in the work to dismantle these systems that are rooted in anti-Blackness. I first want to say that everything that I'm about to say has been predominantly informed by the work of Black women. I think that much of the conversation on anti-racism that's happening now amongst white folks are things that Black women have been talking about for generations and generations, really hundreds of years at this point. So nothing that I'm about to say here is from me, is something that I've thought of. A lot of it is rooted in the work that my colleagues and all of the women at Mothering Justice do. A lot of it is rooted in the work of Dr. Rima Vassar, who is an activist here in Detroit. A lot of it's rooted in learning from Danielle Slaughter, who we're going to hear from in a bit, as well as Trina Green Brown, who does work for Parenting for Liberation. So I would encourage everybody to go check out those folks and follow the work that they're doing. I think that for white parents, one of the most important things that we need to be aware of is that we cannot avoid conversations about anti-Blackness, about race with our children. Danielle Slaughter, a couple of years back now, I think, had a blog that was so important for my learning about the ways in which when we keep our children quote unquote innocent on these topics, we're actually ensuring the continuation of white supremacy. So just as Nkenge had mentioned earlier on, you know, our children are not colorblind. Our children notice differences, they notice racial differences, they pick up on stereotypes that we know are everywhere in our world, in our media, in our classrooms, in the books that we read, in the stores that we shop at, in the lesson plans in the classroom. So we really have to consciously and always be aware of those things and be willing to have these conversations with our children. And this is really generational work, right? It's not something that's going to change in our lifetime, but we need to know that raising white children is really essential to moving things forward in this country. So what we do know is that within the first years of life, right, babies and young children begin to show racial biases. They show preferences for caregivers that look like them, that have the same skin tone as them. And we know that preschool children are picking up on all sorts of social cues, which are shaped by the prejudice from the adults around them. So their teachers, their parents, any other caregivers in their lives. By preschool and early elementary school, children begin to exclude others and form peer groups based on racial biases, which is anti-Blackness in this country. One of the ways that we can combat this as white parents is to be using very explicit and clear language with our children. So when our children are pointing out differences in skin color, in hair texture, in books, in media, we need to acknowledge those differences rather than brush past them. When we give children language around, you know, who is called Black in this country, who is called white in this country, where those concepts are rooted in, and the history of this country, that can go a long way to building some awareness for them. As I said, children are not colorblind. So when we don't talk openly and explicitly about these things, then our kids are left to make their own assumptions, which is right, that we don't need to notice it, we don't need to talk about it, or they're going to be picking up all of those stereotypes that are just like the air that we breathe, which is anti-Blackness again. When we see that diversity is lacking, it's important too that we acknowledge that to our children. If you're reading a book and you notice there's only white characters in the book, point that out, bring that up. If you notice on a television show or other media that you allow your children to consume, point out those stereotypes, point out when you notice that there's only white characters present, or that the Black children in storybooks are only referenced in terms of enjoying sports or music or whatever else. We need to be reading books that explicitly discuss race with our children, but then also books that uplift other stories about Blackness. So stories that show Black people as their full human selves, not just as stories about slavery and stories about oppression. There's so much more to Black life and Black experience than those things. It's as simple as examining the toys that you have in your household, the books that you have in your household, making sure that those items reflect the world and the diversity in the world. Making sure that we're really present in our children's classrooms, right? So even if you're in a school that is predominantly white, you should still be paying attention to what books are being read in the classroom, what toys are available in the preschool classrooms, what lesson plans are happening around history, right? We oftentimes are seeing completely whitewashed history, right? And we know that this is historically rooted in anti-Blackness. We need to be making sure that we're holding our teachers and educators accountable, and making sure that we're forming authentic relationships with parents of color and Black parents in our children's schools as well, so that we can be uplifting them and their voices and what they need and what their children need, so that we can really be accomplices in making sure that our schools are doing right by all of our children. So I just want to also uplift a couple of resources. Raceconscious.org is an incredible resource that gives a lot of support around ways you can have explicit conversations with your children, answers to questions that might come up from your children, book lists, all types of things at raceconscious.org. I also want to uplift the work of Lanisha and Naomi, who run Education with an Apron. They actually offer a lot of content for white families, guides to talking about racism and anti-Blackness with your children. And then finally, a local resource here in Detroit, Detroit Parent Collective. Rima Vassar leads Courageous Conversations there right now on Thursday evenings. She is a wealth of information about education equity, how white parents can be showing up in schools better, how it can be talking to our children. And so I really want to uplift the work that Dr. Rima does as well. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Sam. And consistent with the way that we do it is we want to make sure that we have an array of voices. So Sam is giving us very important information that goes across to our allies in the white community. And it's absolutely vital that we hear from our African-American voice as well. So please join me in welcoming Danielle Slaughter, also from Mothering Justice. Danielle, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am Danielle Slaughter, and I work for Mothering Justice as a fellowship coordinator for our Black Mamas online fellowship. I also do work in parenting and diversity. So I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit today about what we can do as Black parents. So I wanted to say that before we can talk about anti-Blackness with our children as Black parents, we need to recognize the way that anti-Blackness has presented itself and how we've already internalized it. Children are sponges. They will pick up everything, literally. And often they do as we do instead of as we say. So anti-Blackness is in every system in America. It's why there are large inequities in education and why discrimination in housing and employment are still allowed to exist. However, we've allowed American exceptionalism to make us think that if people just work hard, they can be afforded the same opportunities as white people, which isn't true. And so in order to dismantle it within yourself, you have to start to dig into what it looks like for you, what you've internalized in regards to respectability politics, and then how you can disrupt that system. So instead of, for me personally, I've always tried to center Blackness in our home. So I know that once my children leave this house, they are going to be surrounded by messaging that is developed to make them feel less than. And so if I center Blackness in our home, they will leave our home feeling empowered. They will know that they come from a rich history. And the ways to center Blackness in your home, some of it is similar to what Sam has said. It's looking for Black toys, music, books, other media priority. For example, when my oldest son got into superheroes, I bought him the Black superheroes, the Black Superman, sorry. So I wanted his first image of a superhero to be someone who had hair and skin that looks like him. And it was before Black Panther came out. So that was my option, was to go find this Black Superman and spend an obscene amount of money. But it was important to me. Other ways that you can do this is if your kid is into photography or something like that, you pick up a book about Gordon Parks, read it with them. If dance is their thing, pick up a book about Debbie Allen, Alvin Ailey, show them video clips on YouTube of Black ballerinas, Black male dancers that they know who look like them. It is so critical for our children to see positive images of themselves, because the media is going to show them negative images, and then our children will start to internalize that. They will think that that is how they are supposed to be, or they will internalize it as, well, if I just behave better and I don't behave like this person, then I will be respected. And we know that that is just completely wrong, and it's also anti-Black. So also in times like this, children will have a ton of questions about protests and discrimination. Talk to them about it from a place of empowerment and resistance. And when I'm talking about children here, I'm specifically speaking about Black children. So I want you to be sure to focus on talking to your children about how we resist systems of oppression, how we resist anti-Blackness as a people. My children's introduction to the civil rights movement has been from children's books like Freedom on the Menu, which is a book about the Greensboro sit-ins, The Youngest Marcher, which is a book about Audrey Young, I believe, who's the youngest known civil rights marcher who was arrested as a child for fighting for her rights. I want them to know that it is absolutely okay to resist anti-Blackness. I want them to know that they're not the first. You don't have to settle for these systems. So if you show them other people who look like them resisting, they will know it's okay to resist. You also need to talk to your children about Black history all year, not just in February. You need to be sure to go to their schools, ask their teachers if they need assistance in any way, coming up with more resources than Dr. King or Rosa Parks. Like our history is so rich, and they need to know more about it. If you can volunteer at the school, go ahead and be a mystery reader. So I've served as mystery reader every year in my son's class, and I always bring a book that has Black people in it. I've introduced the kids to Debbie Allen, or oh gosh, it's slipping my mind right now, the other person at the moment. But you can do those things in a way that disrupts the system. And then also your children will start to see you as a dismantler. They will see you as someone who fights back against what everyone else is doing and what everyone else says is okay. And I wanted to piggyback off of something that Sam said that we need to do also as Black parents, and that is to be careful of the messaging that you yourself are sending your children. So when you talk about certain neighborhoods, are you speaking negatively about that neighborhood? Do you call it a ghetto? Do you complain about grocery store offerings in Black neighborhoods? Do you say these negative comments about groups of young Black children outside on the corner in the summer instead? Or you might just be saying these things in passing and not thinking your children are internalizing them. But instead of doing that, focus on teaching them about housing discrimination, food deserts. Why our grocery stores might not have certain things is because of inequalities and how the grocery stores are stocked. go to the customer service representative with them and say, hey, we would like to have more organic offerings. We'd like to have more produce. Let them see you fighting back against these things. And then also talk to them about the need for community centers in our neighborhood. And so our children need things to do in the summertime, and sometimes those things don't exist in our neighborhoods because of discrimination and anti-Blackness. If you want more in terms of how to talk to Black children specifically about these things, Parenting for Liberation is a really great resource for Black parents. It's helped me tremendously. And Trina Green Brown, who founded that website, also has a book out now. Thank you.
And thank you, Danielle. Thank you so much for lifting up that Black history is what you live and not something that just occurs in the month of February. But as we think about images and how we raise our children, it's also very important that we include our Latino families. So we're happy, and many of you know, Angela Reyes, who is the CEO of the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. Angela, please join us.
Hi, my name is Angie Reyes, and I am the proud mother of 4 grown children, a grandmother of 8, and a great-grandmother of 5. And I'm also the executive director and the founder of Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. So as a Latina, how as Latinos do we address this issue of anti-Blackness in our community and families, which we know is there? Unlike in the United States, in much of Latin America, the African descended population was absorbed into our general population of Latinos. But our own internalized cultural histories often erase the contributions of African descendants to the past and present of our Latino culture, history, and identity. And internalized racism shows up in many ways in our community and even within our families. Think about the nicknames we give to our children based on color, güero or negro. The things that we, and how we treat our children sometimes in the same family differently because of the shade of the skin or the texture of their hair. And some folks talk about improving our race by marrying lighter skinned people. All of these attitudes and beliefs are a direct result of these 500 years plus of racism and this deliberate strategy of divide and conquer. Many Latinos can relate to the struggle African Americans face against their constant dehumanization by the country's law enforcement institutions. It's a struggle that we often share on the streets and in the courtroom and in our mainstream media. But our experiences of how we experience injustice is very different. As Latinos, which is a designation of ethnicity, not a race, we often find ourselves struggling to find our place within this racial landscape that is often defined as only Black and white. And while we're trying to deal with our own internalized biases and sometimes societal pressures to assimilate into whiteness. So I'm going to take this opportunity to reflect on anti-Blackness in our own communities and to take some concrete steps to decolonize our own minds, our families, and our people. And as parents, what can we do right now to address this issue? So the first thing is to really educate our family members about the African roots in Latin America, because Afro-Latino history is Latin American history. We have to make sure that we incorporate this history into our dominant narratives, and that work starts in our homes. So rather than holding your tongue when a family member drops a racially insensitive remark, speak up and educate those around you. Build your children's ethnic pride, including information about our diversity within the Latino history and culture, and talk to your children about the value of that diversity and empathy. Bring visibility to Black Latinos by using your voice and your own visibility, and open up a space for Black Latinos in our cultural space, either through the arts, literature, film, stories, social media, whatever platform you have, use that to bring that visibility to the forefront. Support policies that change, policy changes that can help combat structural racism, especially in policing, but also in other institutions such as education and health disparities. We have to support organizations and activists that are fighting against anti-Blackness in the African American community, but also within the Latino community as well. And as part of educating ourselves, we need to start reading and continuing to learn about the history of Afro-Latinos in our own communities in Latin America and here in the United States. And we have a list of a lot of different books that you can read as Latinos to educate yourselves and your families. And I think we have a slide that have a list of some of those links that you can refer to that I think we can show it. Molly, is that list available? There you go. So here's a bunch of resources I think that parents can use, and even if you're not a parent, to read about some of the history and the relationships of exploring African history and culture and how it's embedded within the Latino community. Thank you.
Angie, and thank you. And thank you to both of our speakers. It's so critical that you remind us about decolonizing our mind and being intentional with the images and the modeling that we do with our children. So I want to pause for a moment, by any chance, if we might have any questions talking about child rearing to assure that there's no anti-Blackness in our next generation. Christine?
Hi, Jametta, thank you. We do have a couple of questions, and we want to encourage people to continue to post their questions in the chat. We also have a survey that's being posted right now in the chat. If you fill it out, you'll be entered to win a $25 gift card. One of the questions is both Danielle and Sam referenced toys and looking and what those toys should look like. Could you give some more specifics or descriptives of what we should be looking for as parents?
So I can speak from a Black parent perspective. When growing up, my grandparents only bought me Black dolls, my mom, and they wanted to make sure that I had dolls that looked like me. So I've done the same with my children for the most part. So I can't do that with superheroes, obviously, because sometimes they're green. But I make sure that the dolls that they do have are all brown skin in some way. I make sure that the hair is textured because I want them to know that they don't have to straighten their hair. I am very specific in not only focusing on Black books that are about history, but also finding books that are just about kids doing normal things. There are a couple really good series. The first one that comes to mind is Jade and Toussaint is a really good series for children who are, my oldest is 8, and so he's really into that series right now. And it's just like a Black boy who does like science experiments. He's really into science, and that is his. And I'm trying to think of the other series, but things like that, looking for images of curly hair, looking for sorry, I forgot to lock the door back. Okay, let mama finish. But yeah, so that would be my suggestion for Black parents, is just making sure that you take the time to really find things that look like your kids.
And then, do you have anything to add for like what parents should be looking for when they're in their children's classrooms? Suggestions that they can give to school about how that can be better?
Yeah. So my son, when he was in preschool, he was he was the only Black boy in his class, and there were like 8 kids. But what his teacher did was make sure that every ethnic group was represented in that classroom. So it's a very small co-op preschool, and they can do that. She went and found like the wooden dolls that we had Middle Eastern students as well. So she went and found them that correlate with each group so that they could see one another in them, and you could see them playing with the toys and saying like, oh, this is Avinash and this is Braxton, and they would like match with the skin. They were 3 and they knew that. So without us telling them, that was indication. So encouraging them to do that. Donate toys to your schools that are Black and brown kids. Donate books that are variety. You know, teachers have smaller budgets in certain communities, and so oftentimes they don't get things that look like the students in those classrooms, but being encouraging and doing that. Even just making an Amazon wish list and saying, hey, I want to donate some diversity to these classrooms. Will someone purchase and do that? Will someone purchase and do that for them?
So there's a follow-up question to this, and you just named one place, which is Amazon, but do you have other suggestions of where you can find toys like this?
I found those dolls at Target, Walmart. Sometimes you really do have to comb the shelves, or you have to go into neighborhoods that you might not normally go into. So I've noticed that stores tend to stock with with the kids who look like that particular neighborhood. I found more Black dolls in neighborhoods that are more predominantly Black, and I don't know if that's like just a coincidence or if that's how marketing works for them. I'm trying to think. There's a few websites. I might have to go and look on like a resource guide that I have for parents, and can I like follow up, or is there a way?
Yeah, Danielle, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So if you could actually share that resource guide, we'll share it with the viewers, and then folks can go, folks can use the whole resource guide. That would be amazing. So yes, you absolutely can. There's a few more questions. Is it okay for white parents to buy Black dolls for their kids to normalize it? Is it okay, and would you suggest it? I think I'm adding that. That's my addition.
I would say yes. I would say, long as you're not doing it, I've seen people do this, and like on Facebook, they'll post a picture of their white daughter playing with the Black doll, and it's like, oh, she just loves her baby. She doesn't care what skin color it is. Like, as long as you're not doing it in some like weird fetish type of way, it's fine. But they need to see that. If you live in an all-white neighborhood, then buy them a Black doll, and that'll be a great way to start conversations about skin color, and why we all look different.
So the last question is related to some more systematic change. You talked a lot about history and making sure that you're sharing the deep, rich history, and not just in February. Is there any movement that you're aware of that folks can be a part of to actually change the history books, so that we're not just talking about Black history in February, but that we're incorporating, that actually school districts are incorporating that all year long?
So I haven't heard of a national movement, but I know that locally, a lot of different school districts are getting pushback from parents about the current curriculums. Teaching Tolerance actually has a curriculum on their website about decolonizing white supremacy in your school's curriculum. That would be a great resource to start with for them. I personally am working with some of the parents at my son's school to petition that the teachers are talking about Black history, or incorporating more Black images throughout the history classes beyond February. And so it's really going to have to be done from like a grassroots sort of thing. Like, you're going to have to get a group of parents together. You're going to have to write letters to the school board. You're going to have to write letters to their principals to really to get action done. And that's actually a really great way. If you have anxiety like me and you can't be in big crowds and do protests like that, this is another way that you can be active in these movements. Write the letters, help them create the curriculum. I've actually volunteered to help some of the teachers that I know at my son's school decolonize their syllabus.
Great, thank you so much, Danielle. That's all we have for questions. Keep them coming, put them in the chat, text them to us. Jametta, thanks, Danielle.
Yes, thank you, Christine, and thank you to our speakers. I might add, listening to the three of you makes me think of a scholar and poet, Hakeem Mathabuti, who in fact was one of the foremost to start developing Afrocentric schools. And one of his quotes that may be useful for us is, if you control the mind, you control it through images. So let's remember, the images that we present to our children are mechanisms for control. So we need to be very deliberate and purposeful in that. And thank all three of you for bringing that to the forefront. And we'll make sure that parents, you have access to more books and information, and these resources will be made available. So we're going to shift a bit in our discussion now from what does it mean when we talk about how we raise our children. And as our Lisa spoke to earlier, she talked about the reality of how particularly young African-American men are treated, our boys and our girls. But treated by whom? Yeah, you know where we're going. We now want to move into a segment to talk about the police. And we know there's been a major shift in the country, not just in terms of our brother George Floyd, but a better understanding, raising an essential question. Do we defund the police? And to help us to start thinking about that and conduct the panel is Reverend Simmons. Larry Simmons, you're on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nope, it's now afternoon. Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to join with you, and joining with me will be Reverend Jerome Warfield, Brother John Sloan, also my sisters Ophelia will be joining me along with Ebony. But let me begin this discussion by framing it in the context of history, because we have the propensity in America to see things in a very small moment. This was written by a historian named Victor Kepler, a PhD at Eastern Kentucky University. And he says that the birth and development of American police can be traced to a multitude of historical and legal and political economic conditions. The institution of slavery and control of minorities, however, were two of the more formidable features of shaping policing. He goes on to say that in 1704, let me get my hat straight here, I want to make sure I'm representing. In 1704, Carolina launched the first slave patrols, which would eventually become the police. And he says they had three functions. The first was to chase down, apprehend, and return to the owners runaway slaves. The second, the police were to provide a form of organized terror to deter slave revolts. And then the third, to maintain a form of discipline for slave workers who were subject to summary justice outside of the law if they violated any plantation rule. That was in 1704. Move the clock up 253 years. And an 8-year-old boy has my first encounter with the police. Me and my friend Milton Lightfoot go over to Outer Drive and Mound Road, where Derby Hill was, in a park. As we're riding through the park towards the hill, a police car speeds up into the park, swings in front of us, and stops us dead in our tracks. The policeman, I can't remember if he got out of the car or leaned out of the window, but he says, barking at us, "What are you doing here?" And so we respond, "We're going over to Derby Hill." He says, "You don't belong here. This isn't your park. You have your own park. Get out of here." My first encounter with the police. 200 years, they are terrorizing the great-great-grandchildren of slaves in Detroit on the east side. Move up a little bit, it's 1987. My son in Southfield has an encounter with the police. This encounter has happened so often, they have a name for it. It's called beat and release. He's beaten by the police and then sent home, and they consider it a win because they weren't arrested. We often think that these are ancient historical things, but I have two of my friends who are here who are much younger than me, and I want to ask Ebony and Ophelia, please tell us about your encounters with the police. Ophelia?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. Ofelia Torres from DHDC, Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, also a community organizer here in our Southwest communities and downriver. When we've been having these discussions, and I've noticed also being a young woman of color, the stereotypes of when we get pulled over, correct? You know, regardless of my status, I have been pulled over once before by, it wasn't even an official police officer, it was a trained police officer, and we were too close to the tracks. And instead of asking for my license, which was in my vehicle, he asked me for my social security number. And I was 19 at the time. This is back in about 2005. And my first experience with having an officer ask me for my social security number when I told him I had my license, but he was pushing for me to give him my social security number. And at that time, many officers who pulled me over don't know I'm a criminal justice major since high school. I graduated from the University of Michigan with my bachelor's of criminal justice. So I know how the system works. I know how stop and frisk should go. I know how when they pull you over, they have to tell you first why, you know, and I know that no officer needs to know or ask for your social security number. So that was one of my first ones. And then later, maybe a few years ago, also during a nighttime stop, it was after a storm, single female, the lights were off on Southfield Road. I'm in a sundress and lights flicked behind me. I didn't see where the officer came from, but I didn't stop right away. I hit my hazard lights and I pulled into the nearest gas station. And the officer, when he came down, was very upset and asked me, he's like, didn't you see I pulled you? Why didn't you stop? And I looked at him. I was already in a state of distraught from the situation I was coming home from, or going home. And I told him, I was like, I'm a single female, brown female in a summer dress in the middle of the night. And the way he looked at me when I told him this, like, he let me go home safely, because I've had encounters, or I've heard of my friends as well, especially females, getting pulled over certain parts, and the officers are not, you know, the right ones, or they're not. I don't want to like say, you know, because we're not characterizing all of them, but you know, sometimes as young females getting pulled over and stuff, it's scary. We've seen that, you know, officers, when they frisk, they touch women in places that they're not supposed to, right? We're afraid, regardless that I know I'm educated in it. I am a brown single female by myself. And so even though sometimes I want to argue and make my point because I know I'm in the right, sometimes I step back because I know, you know, one against them, or however, you know, it might not look that good for me. So some of my encounters too in downriver, and what I've noticed too in downriver, a lot of the police forces are all white police forces. So which makes it even more interesting, and to see the majority of people, who do they pull over, you know? And like I've mentioned, I've been asked before for my social security number, which has nothing to do with my ability to drive or not. Like if I have my license, you shouldn't be asking me for my social security number. And so, you know, same thing with the licenses. We know in our community, licenses are lacking in a lot of our undocumented communities. And that's one of the stereotypes of a brown person, Latino, an immigrant, that majority don't have licenses, and they're an easy target for either state police, and that turns into an ICE detainer, for no license. So regardless of being here, born and raised, regardless of working for the community, being educated, unfortunately, all they see is your skin color, and that's what they go by. So so that's why I'm here too, to help educate, to help people realize these big stories, because without our stories, without talking, without our social media, you know, a lot of this isn't known. And now we're trying to bring it to light, which is great. So I'm glad to be part of this coalition, different organizations, all organizations of color, working for the same purpose, right? For the safety of all our people.
That's a lot more recent than my stories, but very similar. Ebony, would you share us a story of your encounter with the police?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Larry, so much for facilitating this conversation, and for encouraging Ophelia and I to share our stories to tee up this larger conversation. You know, as some of my committee members know, I was a bit hesitant to share here on this town hall, because I still struggle with feeling like, I mean, there's something more that I could have done. There's something that I can do now to to make a difference in the Ann Arbor Police Department, or maybe I should have raised my voice more around the situations that I've unfortunately encountered while a student at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. So with that being said, let me just say that we do not have enough time for me to talk about all the unfortunate occurrences that I have had with the police, but I'll share one of the more egregious ones while I was in grad school. So this was either 2012 or 2013. And I'm sorry, my name is Ebony Taylor. I'm the Michigan Executive Director of Mothering Justice. And sorry, that was kind of abrupt, but I forgot to mention that. But anyway, I was in grad school 2012, 2013 in Ann Arbor. I was leaving dinner with two of my friends, another Black woman and a Black man. And we were crossing the street at a light, at a crosswalk. And we saw a car, like, sorry, Nats. We saw a car, approaching the light, but it was a ways back. And we were like, oh, it's a short street. We can just leisurely walk across. And it's like, as soon as we hit the street, the car began to almost like accelerate. And so we're proceeding, and like we added a little shuffle to our walk to get across. And as the car is coming to approaching the light, I look back, and it's the Ann Arbor police. So he sees me look back, and then I mouth, or I say to them, I was like, wow, that was the police. And that's all I did. I didn't do any finger, like put any do anything profane with my hands, nothing. And he went through the light, whipped around, and put the truck up on the sidewalk and cut us off on the sidewalk. And he said, give me your ID. Very aggressive behavior. Give me your ID, give me your ID. And at this time, I'm in grad school for public policy. And I'm like, my ID for what? I said, we walked across a crosswalk. You almost hit us. We were leisurely walking and you were accelerating and you almost hit us. And so I'm refusing. He's like, I'm like, officer, we're gonna just go to our car. And he was like, no, I'm gonna arrest you. Give me your ID. And I said, for what? He never answered the question, but proceeded to attempt to grab my hand to put them behind my back. And I'm like, no, and I'm snatching away. But basically it ended in my friends like begging me. One of my friends was almost to tears, begging me to give my ID. And so he called for backup. So another police officer came. I tried to talk some sense into him and tell him what was going on, to no avail. It ended with me giving my license and a $300 ticket, which I paid. It was for impeding traffic. So as if there's like just traffic and I just ran out, in the middle of the street for no reason, not at a light, not at a crosswalk. That's like the equivalent of impeding traffic. So I didn't take it to court because I've been to court in Ann Arbor where I see the judge and the police officers talking about, the poker game or whatever, going out on their boats or whatever the case might be. And so I was really discouraged to speak up about it. And I just felt really hopeless in the situation. A lot of my non-Black counterparts in school never had any occurrences, while at this point, including undergrad, I had had several interactions with my friends or by myself with the police. So yeah, that's my story. And I do hope that it means something to the folks listening, that I would just want us all to think about how we can do more. And I think that this conversation that Larry is about to facilitate will help us think about the ways that we can do more.
So I want to thank both my sisters for sharing these moments, because I can tell you, as I prepared for this, it was very triggering for me. I recalled encounters with the police, and reading the history of the police brought back feelings which I've learned how to keep away. So coming to pick up the discussion about the defund police issue, I'm going to invite Reverend Jerome Warfield, who's a former chairman of the Detroit Police Commission. And I'm going to ask Brother John Sloan, an active leader of the Black Lives Matter movement, if they would unmute both their telephone and their camera and join me. I'm going to give each of them 4 minutes, 5, to answer this question and address the question of defunding the police in response to this question. In light of the history which has been shared and the experiences, do we need the police?
Thank you, Pastor Simmons. Thank you, Pastor Simmons. It's always a pleasure to be in your company and to be with you, and thank all of you for being on. I've learned so much just from sitting here listening for the last hour. This has been outstanding, and so thank you. So let me go straight to the question. Do we need the police? That's absolutely, we need the police. I think with the history that you read, Pastor Simmons, from 1701 gives us an understanding of the context of how the police was formed. And what's interesting is about context and culture is that it follows the pattern, even if it's not implicitly stated that culture is there. And what we see today has been hundreds of years of context and culture that has been baked into what we now know as public safety or police officers throughout our country. They do know better because they know no better, because the training, because of the history, because of the experience that they teach and that they receive, it basically continues on and on and on. And so I want to just share a few quotes I looked up right before coming. Martin King, Reverend Dr. Martin King said this years ago. He says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied by a single garment of destiny. And what affects one directly affects all indirectly. And one of the things that we're seeing with the defund the police movement is that the direct impact of these horrible actions on the people who are brown and colored are affecting everyone. And so we see that. I like what Malcolm X said about this, though. Here's what Malcolm X said back in the 60s. He says, don't tell me to turn the other cheek while you are killing and destroying my people daily. No, until I see you turn your cheek and stop destroying people globally, then maybe I'll think about it. But until then, we're going to fight for our rights as a powerful race by any means necessary. And that's what Malcolm X said to us. So when we look at this issue of defund the police, I think we have to understand what is meant by that. And so there are many questions as I began to look into this issue. Is defund the police, is it implementing a less harm policy or policies, or is it system-wide change throughout public safety and throughout the police, throughout the country? Does it mean just fewer police officers? Or should the money be shifted from the police programs and be shifted to more social programs like mental health and housing and education? Is defund the police reallocate? Is it abolish? Or is it reform? And this boils down to leaders making literally policy changes that reduce reliance on officers and reallocate money spent on law enforcement to Black and brown communities for services such as schools, such as healthcare, such as housing, and livable wage jobs. Here's what Coleman Young said many years ago. I'm a very good student of Coleman Young. He said this: there's nothing wrong, and he was talking about the city of Detroit. There's nothing wrong with the residents of the city of Detroit that a good paying job cannot solve. And so when we look at defund the police, we're looking at the money that's going toward keeping the culture going versus putting funds, money, and resources in neighborhoods where that culture is not only not needed, but it is just done away with. I will say this, you will always have some people who have a spirit of them that says, I can't do no right. I call them the can't do right people. There will always be in any culture, in any society, people who just can't do right. You need law and order for folks like that. You need to be able to sequester them away from society without question. But by the same token and the same vein, what you don't need is an entity, is a group, is an organization of people who literally go around marking terror in the lives and in the minds of communities that they're supposed to protect and to serve. I got a lot more to say, but I'm in with this quote from Christ. He says this. He says, he says, if you want to know what love is, he says, if you want to know what love is, I want you to love the Lord your God with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your soul. And the second commandment is just as important, to love thy neighbor as thyself. When we begin to do that, we'll have less need of the police, but we got to have the resources and we got to have the opportunities for communities of all colors.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Warfield, for that Matthew quote there. John, Mr. Brother Sloan III.
Yeah.
We are pleased to welcome you representing the Black Lives Movement. Please share your answer to the question, do we need the police? And how does that connect to defund the police movement or defund the police call?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. I'm a representative of the Detroit chapter of Black Lives Matter. I'm just one of the leadership, and I'm thankful to be able to have this space. I chuckled when you asked that question. And respectfully, Reverend Warfield, we're going to disagree a little bit. I also want to say that just because you hear us disagreeing in this moment does not mean that there is dissension in the movement, right? Like, what's important as we move forward is for us to be able to have these open conversations. And these conversations are what is vital to us being able to move forward as a people. So respectfully, do we need the police? My answer is no. Do we need safety? My answer is yes. And I think for a long time, there has been a linking between the two. There's been this idea that I feel is a fallacy, that the abundance of policing, the system of policing is tantamount to a system of safety. And that is something that I push back against, that the Detroit chapter BLM pushed back against, that's the movement for Black Lives pushes back against. I'm going to talk really briefly about a couple points. A lot of them, Rev, you hit on earlier in your context about the history of policing and how it grew. But I think it's important for us to remember a couple things. Number one, when people talk about the system being broken, that's not true. The system is working the way the system was designed to work. The system is benefiting the people the system was designed to benefit. And if you don't believe me, read the Constitution. The system was built to benefit rich, white, heteronormative, land-owning Christian men. And the further away you get from that identity, the more the system actively works to oppress you. Building on top of that, the system of policing that we have right now was not built to eliminate crime. It was built to maintain a social order, right? It was built to maintain a stratification of haves and have-nots. And we see, to expound upon what Rev said earlier about police being grown, especially in the South, from slave patrols. You see a migration of that philosophy considerably into the North during literally the Great Migration. The Great Migration, as a lot of historians will tell you, spans widely, right? So you're talking generally 1910 to 1970. And so that means during that period, during that 60-year period, you're having these systems of policing that started with slave patrols that are built on the idea of white privilege, that are built on a system that is broken. I'm sorry, that system that is not broken, but is functioning intentionally in this way. And that idea and that philosophy is being implemented across the nation. I want you to imagine for a second that you want to buy a house, right? You walk into this house and you have the home inspector and he walks around and he says, you know, this house is great. It's got a lot of square footage. The windows are fantastic, but the foundation is cracked. Well, if the foundation is cracked, then you can paint the walls, you can redo the bathroom, you can put a new shine on the floors, but that foundation is always going to be cracked. And so we got to start with the understanding that our system in this country is the foundation, and the policing was built on top of that system. And the more we work with the mind of reform, the more we think about, well, let's just require some de-escalation training, the more we are putting ourselves in the position to have that house crumble back down on top of ourselves. The second thing I want to say is that a lot of times people try to have this conversation without full context. And Rev Warfield touched on this a little bit. When you're talking about safety, you have to talk about all of safety. You can't just talk about over-policing. You have to talk about a lack in equity to educational resources. You have to talk about a lack in equity to food and water justice. You have to talk about a lack in equity to fair housing practices. If we were to take a poll amongst all the people here today, and amongst everybody living in Detroit or in Michigan or in the world, and you said, what does safety look like to you? I guarantee you, nobody's going to answer that question just through the lens of policing. They're going to say, well, what does it mean to be safe? I need a roof over my head. I need to know that I have water. I need to know that I can feed my kids. So when we start having this conversation about defunding the police, we're not talking about tearing something down. We're talking about what it means to build something up in its place. I'm gonna look at a note real quick because I want to make sure that if I'm telling you something, I'm telling you the right thing. If you look at the recent budget projections, right, you're going to see that for fiscal year 19 and the projections through 2021, 22, 23, you've got the police department getting on average about $350 million. If you compare that $350 million that just DPD is getting to what the Department of Housing and Revitalization is getting, right? They're getting, again, this is an average of 4 or 5 years, around $50 million. So DPD is getting literally $300 million more than the city is putting into housing and revitalization. So when you talk about this idea of what does it mean to defund the police, it's got to have multiple facets. One facet, Rev Warfield touched on this, is reallocation of funds. Taking from that $300 million excess, right, and saying, well, maybe we could put that towards ensuring that we have equitable housing practices. It was just 6-7 months ago that the Detroit News released a study, and a lot of people have been following this, that Detroiters have been overtaxed by some like $600 million, that there's been a massive tax foreclosure crisis that has been happening in this city. And so like that is one of the areas that we can use, that we can take from those funds and transfer over into other funds. And we can have this conversation about a lot of different topics when it comes to the way our educational resources are allocated. And I know I don't want to go too far over on time, but the last thing I want to say is when we're talking about what it means to build something back up. A few years ago, Black Lives Matter Detroit started working in combination with a few other organizations, like Media Projects, DARJC, to build the Detroit Safety Team. Because we are not interested in having conversations about the dismantling of something. What we're interested in is having conversations about the building up of something, right? And so what the Detroit Safety Team does is we work with the IARP, which is the International Institute for Restorative Practice, the non-abusive physical and psychological intervention training programs, to try to figure out how we can create community-centered safety. And we talked about this a few moments ago.
I hate to interrupt you.
I was trying to get through my list, Rev. I'm sorry.
Our segment time is up. I want to say this to close. We were hoping to have an exchange between the two of you, which time doesn't permit. But here, let me tell you what I heard, and we're going to come back to this discussion again, because I think the two of you have reflected something that can be built on. Both of you have acknowledged that the issue of safety in our community is much broader than police. Both of you have acknowledged that there is a culture originating in slavery and moving with African Americans out of the South into the North of terror and intimidation. Whether or not there are police is the last peg of that discussion. And I am hoping that in the future, either in this forum, or another, we will pick up on this and see if we can join these two wings of thought into a collective action that brings safety to our community and resolve the terror that has been visited on us by the police. I'm sorry we can't debate and discuss this further, but both of you have represented your points of view very well. God bless you, God keep you, look forward to talking to you soon. Oh, by the way, I haven't just been playing with my hat. Anybody know what 2160 is? It's the day that the four brothers sat down at the lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and started the student movement, which led to SNCC, which led to the Black Power movement. History lesson. See y'all later. Bye.
Thank you, Pastor Simmons.
That's
And
how
as
we
you
do
said, that's how we do it in here. And while you bring that up, you talk about SNCC that led to Stokely Carmichael, who led into a Pan-Africanist perspective. So there's so much for us to learn, and we look forward to coming back to the conversation about the difference between police and safety and all the complexities that we really need to consider in that dialogue. But while we're talking about complexities, that brings us back to our world right now. And we're in the midst of COVID still. And in the midst of this, we always need to hear from our public health and our medical community. And so we're so pleased to have come back to us again to share critical information and what's going on with the coronavirus, what we're seeing in Michigan and also nationally. We're pleased to have Dr. Oveta Fuller, who is a virologist at the University of Michigan. Dr. Fuller, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this amazing group of community coalition that does such a great job on this. We're in this 14th time. So what I'm going to do is just try to update you on COVID-19 and get some idea of where we need to go. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can see it. Is that right?
Yes, we're good.
Yes. All right, so we're in the middle of a double pandemic crisis where we just were talking about anti-Blackness, racism that is prevalent in this country and systemic in this country and must be changed. And also this is occurring and being unveiled in the middle of the continuing COVID crisis. So the take home that I'm giving you today is that we must stay diligent, informed, and proactive. This is a picture from a Harper's Bar in East Lansing back in March. My husband works in East Lansing, and yesterday, 22 young adults who visited that bar on Monday or Tuesday or this weekend were tested positive for COVID, and there may be others that will be positive. So the point is we are still in the midst of this pandemic. Young adults may not get critically sick, some may not, but they can be vectors to other people. This picture shows you the one area of a cell producing coronavirus. So it doesn't take a lot of virus to produce a lot of infection to produce lots of virus. This is the normal picture. This is the colorized pictures. And the blue ones are all the viruses produced just from this one little portion of the cell. So where are we in America? Here's what we want to get to, a flattened curve that ultimately eliminates the virus. We are nowhere near that. This shows the total cases in the US. This is the daily change looking from March 25th out to June 24th was the last date where there were 37,945 new cases in the US. So we are not going down like this. We are still up in the levels. And this shows you in another way compared to when we double we are doubling our cases every week as shown here. So this is the US curve, nothing like what we want to be. What's happening in the great state of Michigan? And by the way, you can't see it, but I have on that woman from Michigan shirt here. So even though I'm still in North Carolina. Here we see that Michigan, based on our past behaviors, because it takes somewhere between 7 and 10 days or 7 and 14 days or more from the time you get exposed to the time you will know if you're infected or not. So this is based on cases since March 25th, daily cases. So the number here is how many were reported to the health department per day of people tested. That means a lot of people are not tested. You can see that our peak was in early April, and we've been going down ever since then. Here around June 15th was when the lowest amount came. But look, we are sort of heading back up here, and that probably as we reopen will continue to go up. The question is how far. You could also look at the same data from deaths. The number of deaths due to COVID-19 has gone down tremendously. Looking at the total COVID in Michigan, this is how many total cases there have been, confirmed cases As you see, the number hasn't stopped, it's still going up. And this shows you where those cases are, with Wayne County, Oakland, Washtenaw being center among those cases. So this is how we do it. What do we have to do to deal with this pandemic of COVID-19 while we're also dealing with a dual pandemic of anti-Black racism, or racism in America, being unveiled because we're all home paying attention? We must remain rigorous. Even though the legal action by the governor says that we can go out and do things, if we don't have to, we should stay home and stay safe. This requires compliance by communities and families and individuals. It takes, as I said, a minimum of 10 to 14 days before exposure or behaviors that allow exposure show up as COVID stats. You could have a play date with a family and not know that your child brought it home to your mother or grandmother until sometime later. Reopening, though legal and certainly valid in Michigan by the data, will lead to more contacts as people go out more infection, and hence a second rising epidemic. So we must stay diligent. The next slides just show you how important testing is for coronavirus. So this shows you that the positive test numbers in Michigan are falling. The goal is the total number of tests done. The green is the number of positive tests. This is exactly what we want to see. So contrary to the fact that some people say that the cases in other places are going up because there are more testing, in Michigan, there is more testing, but fewer positive cases. That's good. This shows you the data in another way, day by day, the red being the positive cases, the blue being the total number of cases of people tested. So we're doing very well there. And then lastly, I just want to show you a little bit of the science. These are, coronavirus is very small, you can't see it. Someone says it's about 10,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. These pictures were by someone from NIH, Elizabeth Fisher. And so this is one cell with various folds and protrusions, and these are all the viruses being produced by that one cell. Here's another cell, it's colored a different color. This is a cluster of virus being put out. So anybody who gets infected, whether they're symptomatic and get sick, or whether they're asymptomatic, like many young adults become, and thus produce virus that can infect other people, this virus is very good at reproducing itself. Here are the phases. I won't go through this, but this is the CDC guidelines and the interpretation being done by Governor and Governor Whitmer and others who are following this very carefully. We are, I believe, in phase 4, about to go into phase 5 in terms of reopening. You can come back and look at this, but note that we can go forward as long as the data in testing and cases and deaths indicate it, or when those numbers go up, we also can go backwards. So we can go from phase 5 to phase 3. And then the last 2 slides here, this one says, remember to know the symptoms and progression of coronavirus infection. The symptoms after potential exposure: dry cough, shortness of breath, fever, headache, muscle pain, tiredness, that the virus produces a mucous membrane problem all down the respiratory tract. So imagine that any one cell here is producing virus like we saw in the previous picture, and that leads to an immune response. What do we do to prevent coronavirus transmission into the lower respiratory tract? If a person is not covering their cough or sneezes or even breathing, the virus that they may be producing can go to someone else. So anyone within 6 feet can possibly breathe in virus produced by another person. It enters the mouth, nose, and eyes, or if we touch our own face from unwashed hands after touching objects that the virus falls onto. What do we do to prevent this? And this is the most critical thing that I want you to get today. We can't stop doing this, or we will never get out of the crisis. There is no vaccine, there is no cure. The only thing we have is prevention. So it helps to avoid inhaling air droplets from another person. How do we do that? Social distancing at least 6 feet from someone else. Wear a mask correctly if you're away from home in the presence of other people. If you're in a park and there's nobody else around, then you might take your mask off. Stay home, shelter in place when you don't have to go out. Disinfect hands, wash hands, avoid touching your face or touching others. And this will get us through to where we want to be, which is the post-pandemic phase that we're all looking for. So with that, I hope that you know this is how Michigan does it. We want to keep these numbers going down. We want to be able to enter our phase of being a post-pandemic stage, but we are nowhere near that at the moment. And I will be here for questions should there be some. Again, thank you for remaining diligent and for the great work that this coalition does on so many fronts for the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fuller. I am sure that we have some questions. Christine?
We do. Thank you. And keep your questions coming. Go ahead and put them in the chat. And there's also a survey in the chat that you can fill out. And if you fill it out, you'll be entered into a $25 gift card raffle. So we have 3 questions at the moment. So the first is, what would happen if everyone, including kids, wore masks? Is the virus spreading because people are not wearing masks?
Okay, 2 questions. So is the virus spreading because people are not wearing masks? The virus is spreading because it's trying to survive, and it survives by getting into human tissue through the respiratory tract, reproducing itself, and then going to another person. So it's going to do that every opportunity it has. Things like staying home so you don't come in contact with other people, or everyone wearing a mask, which means that if I'm producing virus and I don't know it, if I have a mask on, that means no virus goes past that mask through my nose and mouth. So I cannot possibly put virus into the environment. So yes, wearing masks is a huge way of preventing ourselves from spreading it to someone else. It's not so much to protect, it does help to protect you from breathing in somebody else's virus, but most importantly, it helps you from spreading virus to other people. And it's a reminder to everyone that we are in the midst of a COVID pandemic that actually kills people. So it does several things to wear a mask. And there's a big issue about how kids will wear masks. I think they're being encouraged to, but we know kids are kids. And so there are many psychologists dealing with that.
Okay. What are your suggestions for keeping kids safe at summer camps or daycare?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know it's come up and I would recommend also Coronavirus House Calls, which is a Call the Experts weekly show on the weekend, Coronavirus House Calls. You can look it up online. I think that for children, letting them understand what we're in and why wearing a mask is so important. Children are much more responsible than often we give them credit to, or if they understand what's going on. So with summer camps and other things, I'll be honest, my children are adults, but if they were young or if I had grandchildren, I think at this point, unless it was absolutely critical, I would not put them in a summer camp. I would not put, as a matter of fact, this may not be probably the right thing for me to say, but I'm going to be truthful. If I had young children, I would probably consider homeschooling them this year. And I know that's probably not what the Detroit Public Schools or any other school would want me to say, but as a virologist, I just believe the risk is very high. And based on what we're seeing around the country, Michigan is doing well, but other states are just not. And so I think we're all going to be in a much worse situation before it gets better. I hate to say that, but I think we are.
Okay, so I think you might have answered this one a bit, and we have questions coming in. So do you anticipate a second wave?
The answer is yes. And let me qualify what I just said. I know that the school systems are working very, very hard to make return to school safe as possible. My own university, other universities are doing amazing things to try to guarantee as possible that people are safe. But as someone said, it's like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. We don't know what is going to happen with COVID, particularly when many governments and people are reopening in what some would consider a less than responsible way because of lack of national leadership. And so even if Michigan is doing well, someone traveling or coming from some other place can change things. So yes, I think we are going to have a second peak.
Are face shields better than face masks? If so, would schools consider face shields a way to protect our children when they go back to school?
Face
So
shields are useful for people who are, say, on the front lines, like people at stores who are at registers, or people who are coming in contact with people. Shields, however, get hard to wear. They allow virus to escape or below the shield. So masks are better for the general public to wear because they're easier to do. And we just need to find the masks that are appealing to us in color or what they mean, and that they're comfortable, and learn how to use them. This is a normal part of life. This is going to be normal for us. And the sooner we get to that, the sooner we'll all get to a point where we'll feel better with it and we'll be a safer communities.
Okay, two more. I've seen some news that Michigan is on track to contain the virus. Honestly, what good does that do if other cases are still going up?
Yeah, that's what I didn't show you this slide, but if you look at other states, Ohio, Indiana, around us, Illinois, and you of course hear of the cases in Florida and Texas and California and Arizona, where the government has not been nearly as responsible and diligent, even in the midst of political pushback, as our government has been. You wonder what's going to happen. We unfortunately are not a United States at this point, and we cannot control what other states do. We can be as safe as possible in our own state and follow the guidelines such that if someone does have virus, whether they're from this state or they traveled in, if we are doing the things to prevent transmission, the rates will be low, and the contact tracing of those cases that do occur will be able to reduce a rise in infection. So we have to follow the guidelines. That's all we have at this point.
So are pregnant women considered high risk? How can they stay safe?
Yes, there's studies being done now about pregnancy and other conditions that could be affected by COVID. I'll just say here that anything that changes your immune function, your overall body's ability to deal with microbes or invading agents can affect COVID. So I think pregnant women, because they're undergoing all the changes, are in that higher susceptibility group. And the best thing you can do is to stay safe using the guidelines that have been put out there. Staying home when possible, using masks and sanitation if outside, avoiding people, and getting lots of rest so that our immune system, even if we are exposed, if our immune system is good and in good shape and robust, having vitamin C and vitamin D, just making sure that we get plenty of sleep. Those things can help our immune system fight off an exposure to not only COVID, but anything else. But it's particularly important right now to care for yourself such that you keep your defenses strong. That's for everyone, but particularly someone who's pregnant or has underlying conditions.
So this is the last question. You said that, you would homeschool your kids next year if you had small children. Is there anything else you'd like to share based on the data about the potential impact for the upcoming school year? So is there anything else that you would like to share in the event that we all can't homeschool?
No, and I understand we all cannot homeschool, and I maybe should not have said that, but I'm
no, it's okay.
a truthful person and pretty straightforward.
No, it's good. Truth is good. Go ahead.
So yes, I think the one thing we can all do is such that when our kids do go back to school, the virus is as low as possible, is to remain diligent now, because what we do now will affect what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks, which is going to determine where we are at the beginning of school time. And so the thing I would emphasize is that we have to stay diligent. Even if our governor opens things up, that doesn't mean we have to open our churches, or we have to open our bars, or we have to go to restaurants. And if we are out, always wear a mask. I cannot overemphasize that. Wear a mask to protect others, to protect yourself, and to send the message that we are in a COVID pandemic, a respiratory virus. Those things will help us later to have the lowest amount of possible exposures.
Okay, so the questions keep coming. So thank you, Dr. Fuller, so much that you're a wealth of information. So many offices, folks are going back into their offices and folks are getting prepared to reopen. Our organization happens to be one. And people are installing air filters. Is this actually helpful? Will this help to filter out the virus?
It depends on the kind of filters. First of all, ideally people want to be outdoors if possible, but realizing that folks have to go indoors for many work situations. Keeping space between people such that there are not multiple people together with respiratory droplets. Secondly, the air circulation is a mixed bag. There are studies that show that air conditioning flow can move virus away from a person and let it circulate in a room, which allows someone else further away to inhale it. The filters will have to be particular filters that can, called HEPA filters, that filter virus. Not all filters do that. So a typical room air purifier might not have a HEPA filter that would be efficient in filtering virus. So it just depends on what kind of air purification system is there.
Great. So there is, okay. I think that's all the questions that we have for now. Thank you,
Christina,
so much. Yeah.
If I could just say, I don't mind answering questions also by email if you guys want that. I'm not opposed to it. So if there are other things that I can help with, I think it's important that people know.
Yes, and you have been so great in sharing both your honesty and your wisdom and your knowledge with us. So thank you so much, Dr. Fuller. It's so nice to have you with us. We feel very blessed that you continue to come back to us and do that for us. Thank you so much. Jametta?
Stay safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And stay
Will do.
strong. And again, doing that with excellent information and resources. And you're one of our treasures, Dr. Fuller, and thank you so much for saying that you would be willing to answer questions after this. But speaking of questions, the reality is that all of us in the coalition, we have questions too. And so in this next segment, we want the opportunity to share with you some of our own experiences, how we've been feeling in this moment. So this is a special part of the program that we're doing now in our 14th week. Reflections from our coalition partners. So we're going to have some of our members to come forward. We've got Marty, Reverend Simmons, Brooke, Crystal, Molly, and Ebony. And I'm going to ask each one of you, if you would, as you do your reflection, to share with us your name as well as the organization that you're representing, being one of the powerful 30 that are part of the coalition. And let's start with Pastor Simmons. Will you take us through this segment?
Yes. Be ye ever ready? Hello, everybody. I'm back again with my Greenboro, North Carolina reminder that history matters. You know, looking at the history of where we've come since mid-March of this year to today, it seems like it was an eon ago. And at the same time, like it was day before yesterday. Marty, you've been a tremendous partner here as the voice of Detroit Public Television, DPTV, which has been so essential to helping make this happen. Tell us, what have you learned, or how has this changed you over these 14 weeks, and what's different?
Thank you very much, Reverend Simmons. You're an inspiration to us all. Excuse me. It's been my privilege to serve as Detroit Public TV's representative to the COVID313 coalition. From the first days of the pandemic, DPTV has committed itself to serving the community in every way it could to help us navigate this terrible crisis. I cannot think of a more valuable partner in this cause than the COVID313 Coalition, which for 14 weeks has organized these virtual town halls, bringing crucial, often life-saving facts and guidance to Detroit residents. COVID313 is an amazing group. I have participated in many committees and other worthwhile projects throughout my career, but I have never encountered a group composed of such committed, compassionate, caring, and hardworking individuals. There are no debates or arguments among them, only productive discussions as we seek to find solutions to today's challenging issues. When we first met, I remember thinking, do these people have any idea what they're getting into? How much work it will take to conduct 2-hour public forums every week? Well, of course they did. Their energy, their industry, their wisdom seem to have no bounds. The results have been amazing. Our town halls have been viewed more than 60,000 times. We've reached something like 135,000 people. And that doesn't include the people joining us by phone every week. More importantly, the 30 plus organizations that COVID313 represent deserves at least some of the credit for turning Detroit and Michigan from a COVID hotspot to a model of community coming together to flatten the curve and stop the spread of the disease. But as Dr. Fuller just told us, this is no time to stop being vigilant. As we move forward, I can see this being even more of a community forum for addressing crucial issues like anti-Blackness, anti-immigrant, and other forms of racism. I think we will continue to be a powerful voice for the community, and I know Detroit Public Television and I will be grateful to be able to provide a platform so that every voice can be heard. Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Brooke, I don't see the babies. We were hoping to see the babies. So Mariela Brooke Plejo, good afternoon. Tell us what's different with you over these 4 months, 5 months, 14 weeks, and what are you optimistic about as we go forward? Uh-oh, you're on mute. Right, Brooke, you're on mute.
Hello.
There you are.
Okay. So my name is Brooke and I am the Community Communications Coordinator at Urban Neighborhood Initiative, UNI. As many of us 14 weeks ago, I did not know what I was getting myself into. I was very afraid, nervous, anxious. I'm a mother. I have a 2-year-old son. So if we're being honest, there were nights where I was just having full-blown anxiety attacks because I didn't know what was to come. However, working alongside all of you, I was able to calm my fears because we are full, with people who know so much information. They're so resourceful. And to be honest, I didn't feel alone anymore. As time went on, I felt a sense of empowerment. I felt knowledgeable because I was able to communicate the information that I was getting from all of you to people in my community. I am Mexican, I speak Spanish, so I was in charge of doing a lot of translation for our chats, for our flyers. And even though some people were tuning in, they weren't watching, I was still able to go ahead and, tell people, spread information that I was learning here with all of you guys. I don't have a child in school, but I know plenty of people who do. So I was passing along information that I was learning from all of you guys. As many have said, we do find ourselves right now living through a time of division, whether it be politically, racially, and to be honest, we're never going to get anywhere if we continue down that path. We need to come together, work together to be able to provide a better future for ourselves, for our future generations, for my son, for all of our kids. So I'm really grateful. I consider myself blessed to be a part of this coalition. And I am so fortunate to have been able to learn so much from all of you.
Thank you, Brooke. And now I'm going to call on Crystal Wilson, who is the Communications Director. Never get your title wrong. You help me, Crystal. But she leads she works in leadership and communication for Detroit Public School Community District. I've had the pleasure of knowing her since she was a little baby. They have been, Detroit Public School Community District has been great partners with us. Crystal, share with us what may have changed with you and why you're optimistic as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you for having us, the district, on. We've been trying to be here every week to provide educational updates. And this has just been a rich place to meet and gather once a week and to provide resources and hope and tips for our family. I remember in February sitting at the table with the superintendent watching the headlines, and we saw COVID-19, it was coming. And quickly thereafter, we were looking at mid-March and it had came. And Dr. Vitti called for all schools to be closed. And we all just kind of looked at him like he was not okay. You're sure this is what we're doing? And the governor hadn't quite made that announcement, but he had already arrived to that point. So I have the privilege of working for a visionary, for a superintendent who understands education, understands reform, but he is very passionate about the work and the students and the families. When he says that he feels that these families and students are his own, that's exactly what he means. And I just remember us going to work and at home working countless hours and trying to work and stay connected as a group so that we could lean on each other for resources. So for instance, our operations team who heads up food services, they quickly assembled the food stations and the grab and go stations so that our families could get meals. And to date, we've served over 1 million meals to our families and students. We worked with our curriculum team. They created these packets, 10 weeks of enrichment packets, so that our students could have access to lessons and learning. And then our counseling team, they worked closely with our teachers to ensure that we called our families. We knew that some of our families weren't interested in reading and writing in school because they were dealing with loved ones who were dying. Dying of COVID was it was snuffing the lives out of their loved ones at a level that I couldn't even keep up with. Our job was to keep up with this tally on the website, and it became emotional because we knew we were serving students and families that in a way that it was outside of school. It was outside of the classroom. It became personal. We wanted to make sure that our family was okay mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically. Are you okay? Do you have what you need? So it's been a profound experience. In addition, as the largest school district, public school district in Detroit, we not only were serving our families and students, we became a source for the whole community. I remember someone reaching out from the state level in a juvenile detention home and saying, can we please use and tap into your resources for our kids? Because we don't have any curriculum. We wouldn't know where to begin to create this for our students. And our superintendent said, yes, use it. So, I mean, that really brought something out of me. I'm a DPS CD grad, class of 93. I went to Osborne High. And I've always wanted to give back to my community. I've always wanted to be in a position where we worked on behalf of folks who look like me, who needed an education like me. And I'm not in the classroom, I'm in communications. But my work became so important because people were depending on those messages every day, every weekend. And I'm changed because I know that I'm, number one, headed in the right direction, but the purpose is still yet to be realized as we reform education in Detroit, as we redefine what we're supposed to be doing for our families and our children. We all play a role. We all play a role. And the last thing I'll wrap this up with, we have a common denominator. You know anything about education, you solve a problem, you have to find a common denominator. Our common denominator is the love for our families, our students, our teachers, and our community. And this coalition showed us by coming together in love and for the interests of our common denominator, we can really make some things happen that wasn't supposed to.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask Ebony, who we heard from earlier, if she would come forward and share what's changed with her. Ebony, I think we're getting pushed on time. And
Okay.
so we're going to try and hold this to 3 minutes for you, and then we're going to close with the mile.
Okay, well, I will be brief. I would just like to say that this was an amazing undertaking and that we have been unafraid, so unafraid and committed to tackling serious issues like the one we did today on anti-Blackness and racism. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we've also been sort of, easygoing enough to, have folks on doing yoga. So it's just been a beautiful thing to witness, from the COVID updates from Dr. Fuller, thank you, Dr. Fuller, to hearing from our youth, to learning about the importance of practicing mindfulness and the impacts of practicing mindfulness with our children. I personally have learned a lot from our content alone. And in terms of just the processes within our group, I just wanted to acknowledge super quickly that Nkenge Browner and I both shared in Mothering Justice's role on this committee and in this group. And together we have learned the benefits of planning and consistency, all done digitally, the importance of diverse voices with a common cause, around common core issues, and constantly asking the question, how can this be made more accessible? Has certainly stood out for me. I know it definitely has spilled over into our work at Mothering Justice whenever we are, hosting anything on our platform. We're always asking this question, even more so now because of our experience in this group. Seeing this group succeed consistently from week to week has encouraged, again, us at Mothering Justice as we embarked upon our first digital version of our Mama's March in May. We adopted some of the ways that have made this group successful. And I'll just close with saying that I'm optimistic that if this group of diverse folks and backgrounds can tackle the issues that we have, I'm hopeful that we can do this as a greater society in the near future, hopefully. So I'll end there. And again, thank you so much again, Larry, for facilitating this conversation.
Thank you, Ebony. And now we come to the one and only Molly Sweeney. Molly is the organizing director for 482 Forward and the behind the scenes, she of all trades worker who knits it together for us. You never see or rarely see Molly in front, but you always feel Molly every week. And so Molly, you're up on camera this time.
That was I got like 2 text messages from folks just now saying, why are you on camera? Thanks, Larry. That was
it's your time.
The nicest.
This is how we do it.
So I'll be brief. Reflection. So for me, one, I've learned a very new skill, which is helping to produce online programming, which is not easy. And I know why DPTV exists. But two, I think the most beautiful thing that I've taken away from this is the importance of relationships in times of uncertainty, and the importance of coming together collectively in times of uncertainty. So this coalition came together in less than 24 hours. And folks very quickly put aside being the front runners, the star of the programs, and recognize that it will take all of us to be able to get the most important information out to parents and students, and to work together through that. And so that's why you don't see any shining stars here. It's really a collective group of folks who have put aside individual organizations' interests to make sure that we're working together for the greater good, which I think is the most beautiful piece of organizing in community. And I think speaks to the leaders who've built this and will sustain it. I also think, there's this anti-racist writer who writes about beloved community as really the pinnacle of multiracial collaboration. And I think that this group, a beloved community is a multiracial, multi-ethnic group who constantly strives for greater goodness together. and that it isn't an easy thing, but this is probably the closest thing that I've been a part of that is close to the beloved community. So very proud to be here.
Thank you, Molly. My reflection will be this. We broke the internet the first week. Yeah. And we have invented something. Marty, correct me if I'm wrong. No other city in the country that we know of has put together a group like this and produced programming for 14 consecutive weeks. Am I right, Marty?
That is correct. This is something to be proud of. It shows the vitality and the collaborative spirit of Detroit and the people who live here. So everybody in our audience should give themselves a pat on the back.
That's right. We invented something. Make sure and have no doubt you will see it duplicated other places. Congratulations. So it's now time to light everybody up. Everybody, take your camera mute off. Come on, let the people see you. The wide diversity of this awesome coalition. We call this the Christmas tree. It's like a Christmas tree with all different color kinds of bulbs hanging from it. Come on, Julie, get on off there and let us see your smiling face. There you are, Christina. Come on, we want to see you. Vanya, come on now. Who's that behind DPTV? So here we have a closeout thing we do in our meetings. We ask everybody to give us one word. So you gotta turn off your background noise so everybody can hear you. I'm gonna call off across my screen, so it may be different on yours. I want you to give us one word about why you're optimistic about the future. And I'm gonna start with the one and only Dr. Ovita Fuller. Dr. Fuller, one word, why are you optimistic?
Amazing people, that's 2 words, like you. 4
You
words.
hyphenated it. Katie, one word, why you're optimistic. Katie, where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
The youth.
The youth, all right, I love it. All right, Marty, we've had our turn, and Jametta, you're gonna close this out when we transition. Ebony, you had your turn. Cindy, one word, why are you optimistic?
Familia, family.
Familia. Lindsay, one word.
Relearning, unlearning, relearning.
I love that. You're gonna close us out, BB, so we're gonna get to you last. Christine.
Leaning into discomfort. I never have one word.
You notice these hyphenated words are getting longer and longer. Brooke.
The future.
I'm sorry, say again.
The future.
The future, I love that. Crystal. Crystal?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like waiting. Students, our students.
Students. Chandra, you almost never come on camera. We should give you 3 words.
The greater good of the community.
Greater good of the community. Okay, 5 words. Let's see. It looks like Jerome Warfield. Give us one word. The Rev. You got to come off mute, brother.
I had to unmute my audio. I'm sorry about that, Bastard. But I would just say very hopeful. Hopeful.
All right. Angela, my sister.
Young people.
Young people. Alisa.
Judah.
Judah. And she's not talking about the tribe. She's talking about her baby boy. Terry.
Connect the community.
Connect the community. White trees.
Togetherness.
Togetherness. Ophelia.
Ophelia.
Us, right? We're part of the future, and this collaboration has given us hope and kept us optimistic to continue. So, us.
Great. Julie?
Cooperation and collaboration. That's 2.
Cooperation and collaboration. Saeed?
Strength, which I see in you guys. Strength.
Strength. I love it. Vanya?
The next generation, youth.
the next generation. And Gloria.
Commitment.
Commitment. I love it. I love it. And so we're going to transition now to our Hope Starts Here segment, which Bernita Bradley, who I affectionately call BB, is going to lead us. And then we're going to close it out with Jametta Lilly. And we have, oops, looks like we're going to close it out now. We're at 1:59.
So you want me to close out, or you just
I think we're going to have to. I'm looking for the director to direct me.
So, Bernita, since you didn't get to say your one word, can you give us like 2 sentences and I'll close us out because there's a few housekeeping things.
Yes.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So I would like to tell everybody that we are here together for such a time as this, and understanding that such a time as this is very important. And unless we take advantage of advocacy and supports that are needed to support our children right now in this time, we fail. But I want you to know that togetherness, that advocacy can be the greatest thing that this world has ever seen.
Thank you, Bernita. You're always really powerful, and I know that you would be powerful in 2 sentences. So thank you.
Christine,
so we're going to wrap it up.
Faith.
Oh, sorry, Jametta.
Faith.
Thank you, Jametta. And thank you to all of our panelists and all of the folks that are watching today for joining today. Again, if your questions didn't get answered, we'll post them next week on onepbs.org and on DPD TV Facebook page. The important thing that we want to share is we are going to take 2 weeks off. Not to worry, we're going to do the highlights, best of next week and the following week, and we'll provide some updates about schools and things that you need to know about COVID if there are updates. We want to remind everybody, please fill out the census. It's incredibly important. We're doing better. Our numbers are getting there. Remind your friends to fill it out. It takes about 10 minutes, but remember those 10 minutes have an impact on the next 10 years for funds for education, healthcare, food, emergency services, really important. Also, we want to remind you to fight anti-Blackness every day and to show up and support the Black lives now and ongoing. And so we will see everyone the week of July 14th. We hope that everyone has a really wonderful holiday, and please take the advice of Dr. Fuller and stay safe during this time and protect yourself. As you can see, it's truly a group effort. So we want to also remind you to stay healthy, stay powerful, and stay strong. Cindy, can you say that in Spanish? Is Cindy gone? Cindy's gone. Cindy, come back. Where's Said?
Technical difficulties, I'm sorry. Se mantengan saludables, seguros y felices.
And Said, can you say that in Arabic?
حافظ على صحتك، كن ثابتا ومتينا وابقى قويا. إلى اللقاء.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great holiday.
Take care. Be blessed.
Sure.